Hi, I'm Shauna. I am the Executive Director of the D'Angelo Center Foundation, and I am grateful to have our SRO extraordinaire, Stacy Collis, here with us again. So we're putting together a resource for you. We have all these questions. Ask your SRO. And community members, so family members and students ask these questions. So we're really excited to present these to you. So have our SRO Stacy answer these with honesty, integrity, so that he always exhibited in serving our children who we love so much. So Stacy, thank you so much for being here. We will go
You're
ahead and
welcome.
just jump right into the questions that we had submitted. And then afterwards, SRO Stacy Collis is going to give us what your SRO wants you to know. So here we go.
Great.
Let's go ahead and kick it off.
All
So
right.
how much discipline do you do?
As a school resource officer, we are trained, we don't do discipline. That is the school that handles that, the administrators, the principals, others within the school that handle the discipline. So we don't do any discipline. And even in our training, when we train new SROs, that's part of the process of training them and saying, hey, we don't do the discipline. That's up to school officials. That's not up to the SRO to, do any type of discipline within the school.
Wonderful. What kinds of issues do kids get in trouble for today?
There's a multitude of things, some similar things to when you and I grew up that, with the drugs, the alcohol, but now you add in the technology, the bullying that's happening 24/7, other things that they get involved in up and to even more serious offenses that happen within the school. So it goes beyond what you and I grew up with and what you necessarily saw because the speed of information is traveling so fast and the kids have the technology. So we're seeing far more intricate, more elaborate situations that we have to investigate, that we have to look at with kids nowadays, especially when you look at legalization of marijuana, other issues, other drugs being legalized and decriminalized. All those things happen. So there is a ton of things that are happening that kids are getting involved in and having access at their fingertips, so to speak, with their cell phones and smart technology.
Thank you for answering that. Now, the next one, I'm really excited that this parent felt comfortable enough to ask us. And certainly you have been an SRO who is well loved by the students in your schools and by the families who you serve. So, and certainly
Uh-huh.
you've always been a wonderful partner to families to help, maybe right the wrongs and,
Uh-huh.
address issues in family units as well. So thank you to this person who felt comfortable in asking this so openly.
Okay.
My kid is in high school and gets in trouble regularly. Things aren't great at home either. Do you know of any resources to help kids back on track?
I think that depends on where they're at. And it's totally dependent upon the, geographics of where they're at. But getting with a school resource officer, getting with community members to see what resources are available. I know many school resource officers that would volunteer their time to try to help that child, to try to get them on track to do those things. Part of our process of being a school resource officer is we mentor, and that's an opportunity to mentor and look to alternatives that you normally wouldn't think of. There are teachers, there are others that will do that and mentor outside of their teaching job. Religious organizations, other schools, anything within the community, but it's very community dependent on what's in the community. So I would look at the school resource officer, and then beyond to see what resources were there. Because what they'll find is if they ask, there will be a ton of people that are willing to help and try to get that student back on track, and especially at home, at work, at school, wherever that's taking place, and will help them with that. So they just need to have that conversation with somebody and open up. And I'm very happy for that question as well, because that's a tough one. When you not sure what to do and you have to, ask that question, it's so important to ask that question and have that conversation, and say, hey, what other resources, what other things are out there that can help me with this situation I'm dealing with my child.
And thank you. I think everybody needs to know too, our SROs, the school resource officers that are in our school, you're special police officers, so very highly trained, and used to working with kids. Not every police officer, this is not a job for every police officer.
uh,
You know how to work with kids, and how to help families. So you very much are part of the community and a helper in the community. So please, I want to make sure that families understand you're here to help. And, if you're having problems or maybe don't have an SRO, please reach out to us so that we can help provide some guidance to you too. So where you can
yeah,
get.
you have to cross over that, and I understand that it's difficult at times, because a lot of times parents don't know us as kids know us. And for them to cross over and say, hey, I'm having this difficulty with my child, they feel that, well, maybe it's my problem, maybe I'm not parenting correctly, I'm not doing that. But they've got to get that thought out of their head and just come forward and ask, because they may not be the only one that's dealing with that, and maybe this SRO, maybe this teacher, maybe this person has dealt with other situations with other families, and might have just, they might have that answer for that parent to say, hey, here's a resource. I know personally for me, when I had parents, I took it personally, and I wanted to find them the resources that they needed for that specific family, that worked for them. It's not a cookie cutter, not every situation is the same. So you've got to be able to ask that question and feel comfortable doing that. And that's my suggestion to any parent is, hey, feel comfortable, ask the question.
That's excellent advice. Thank you. Okay, the next question is, are you in schools all day?
Um, every jurisdiction is different with the SROs. When I was in there, I was a detective slash SRO slash officer. So I had a multitude of different, things that I had to do. We are in there majority of the time that we can be there. There are certain situations where we're outside of the school. A lot of places, are going to, hey, we want the officers in there a majority of the day, to be there at the school. For us, when I was doing it, we were pulled out at certain times depending on, stuff going on within the city. If we had a caseload and we had to follow up on something, we were outside the school. But part of our job as school resource officers was to make sure that the school was as prepared as they could be, the students are prepared as they could be, so that if a situation happened when we weren't there, they knew what to do. And it didn't rely on us being there, because we had other things and there's only one of us. And at my school, there were 1,600 students plus staff. And so, it's a large school, but the preparation for us was big, because there were times that we weren't at the school, but a majority of the time we were there, and we do after hour activities too. So a lot of us would work basketball games, dances, all of those type of things. So not only are we there during the day, but a lot of times for after school activities, we're around, or in that area.
Wonderful. So this kind of ties into that too. What do you do during school breaks and summer vacation?
School breaks and summer vacations, everybody's favorite. Um, we kept active with the kids. Things, with the kids. Yeah, we took our vacation time, especially at breaks when kids are off and stuff. That's necessarily when we would take our vacations and say be with our families during that time. In the summertime, we did activities and were assigned to things over the summer with kids. We went out and did home visits with kids and said, hey, do you need any help getting a job, or are you looking this direction, in going? We ran youth police academies in the summertime to get kids involved in the process, and also, tried to do some patrols, extra things around the city that involved youth, because that's what our background is. And I know Lakewood, where I was at, they now do hiking with officers, and they go out, a group of kids, and hike and go out into the foothills and talk to kids and do all sorts of stuff over the summer.
Wonderful. It's exciting stuff. How much additional training do you get as an SRO?
As an SRO, it's asked that we go through a basic class, which I'm an instructor teaching a basic SRO class, and that covers a multitude of different things. It's not just law enforcement. I mean, we're teaching officers to go in and make the transition to working with youth, working with administration, working with teachers. We also have advanced training to go more in depth, into certain areas. We train in adolescent mental health because that's a big issue. And so, not only that, but looking at other issues that kids are facing, teen suicide, the mental health piece, more advanced training, whether that be on, I'm trying to think of the term, but on the spectrum, working with those youth to better train and better communicate with our students, our staff. And my recommendation when I teach a basic is get as much education as you can, because that's part of how we get better as a group of SROs, is to get that education and learn more. And that's not just education in the sense of book learning, but education when it comes to the kids and what they're into and what the technology. I also teach on technology and social media, which most adults stay away from, but that's education. And we've got to know how to work with kids to get them to understand, pros and cons to social media, to technology, all those things.
And you have honestly been a wonderful partner. So with us, of course, to offer some of these additional trainings, and then we have lots of other subject matter experts that we're giving those additional trainings to. We could talk
Uh-huh.
forever about social media, but we'll make that another resource. So of course, so why aren't SROs in elementary schools full time?
That there are certain jurisdictions that is the case. They're in there, depending on staffing levels for the department, to get the officers there, because across the country, within law enforcement, it's people aren't coming in like they used to, and trying to get people in there, so it can be a staffing level. Most agencies are paying their officers, to be in the schools, and it's a budgetary thing sometimes for agencies. Other times, school districts are stepping in and helping pay for that school resource officer to be there. So it's a plethora. I would love to see an SRO in every elementary school. If I had anything to say, or take a magic wand and say, hey, this is what I want to do, it would be, hey, an SRO in every school. And certain schools need two SROs because of the size. You look at campuses that are just massive, And just one SRO is not enough. You need two, maybe even three for some of the larger jurisdictions that have a very large campus and student base. It is questions, my agency, we didn't have them in the elementary schools, but we talked to our patrol people and said, they did what's called an adopt a school program, and those that worked that area that had that elementary school, they adopted that school, and they were asked to go out and check in and have lunch with the kids and do those things as much as they could throughout their work time.
That's a lot of fun programs in that. Now
Mhm.
we get into another one of these details here. Now my daughter always expressed frustration with this and the bathrooms in her high school becoming not bathrooms, but vaping rooms. Um,
Uh-huh.
this question is high school kids are into vaping, both nicotine and marijuana. Is that really a big deal? We did it when we were their age too.
And and not knowing the age of the person asking that question, vaping came around probably in the early 2000s, is where I started to see it in the schools and starting to come in. And it is an issue because it is affecting them. Just like with cigarettes, we talked about the cigarettes and the harmful effects of that. There is no control over the juices that are used. The marijuana concentrations are extremely high compared to what they used to be. We're seeing kids that part of the vaping, the nicotine, they use nic salts in these vaping instruments. And Juul was one of the brands that was there. And as an example, one cartridge, what a student could go through in 15 minutes, was equivalent, the amount of nicotine was equivalent to one pack of cigarettes. And they go through it in 15 minutes. And kids are doing this just to get high with the vaping. They're doing this, then they're having problems with the concentration of the marijuana and having an extreme health impact. So it's my belief that, yeah, there is a problem to that. Do kids experiment? Do kids do things that they shouldn't do? Yes, we all went through those phases of growing up. Things were there. But again, it's all there. The regulations say that they need to be a certain age to possess those things, but yet we see these kids younger and younger that are possessing the vapes. They're doing it in the classroom. There's an addictive nature to it, and the kids are doing that. They figured out how to get that in, and within a school setting, it can become very disruptive. And especially think of a classroom where a teacher, you've got a kid that's vaping, and they're doing it and they won't stop. It's that addictive nature of that vaping device, whatever it is they're using.
Thank you for that. I know Colorado Attorney General's office has done a few educational resources on this too. So, and it's really important to understand for those of us our age, this is not the same marijuana. So that was in existence in our youth. So it's very different. Lots of
Yeah,
resources we have on the
and one of
website.
the things, and sorry to interrupt you, one of the things that I get passionate about this because of looking at the marijuana, but studies showed that back in the 70s, or in that arena, the THC contents were, yeah, maybe 4% or sometimes less, but now they're running probably close to 27% THC contents. So you look at that growth, and then not only is it the marijuana, that's just the leafy, green, smelly, skunkweed marijuana that we're talking about there. When you go into the stuff that is in vapes, and the derivatives of that with the THC contents, it goes up much higher than 27%. when the liquids are going in, the dabs, the wax, the other things that are being used in vapes, and then you're getting upwards of close to 80% THC content. So it's in my simple estimation, it's got to be having some harmful attributes to them doing this, especially at those concentration levels.
Right, especially when your prefrontal cortex is not yet formed.
Yes,
So here's another one. What kinds of kids get in trouble?
it is across the board. Um, there are a certain few, and the statistically the numbers would be very low in my estimation, that go through their high school career and or school career for that matter, without doing something. That it is across the board. It's your athletes, it's your smokers, it's your whatever group, and it may be something different that they're getting in trouble for from group to group, but it's across the board. And it's a part of growing up with kids that they are going to test the waters some way, shape, or form. That's how we all learn, is by, hey, I tried that. That didn't work. I'm not going to do that again. I'm going to go this direction and try this. And so if we remember back to when we were kids, and hey, we make mistakes. That's how we learn. What we don't want students to do is make the same mistake, 5, 10 times. Then they're not learning. But when we look at it, it's across the board.
Well, thank you for that. I will acknowledge it is developmentally appropriate, so to test your limits, and parenting is not easy. So we've
No,
got to
it
do that.
is not.
So here's another pretty detailed one. And again, I appreciate the person who gave so much detail and information of themselves. So to ask this, one of my kids went to a sleepover, and I found out later that the kids were provided alcohol and marijuana. The parents didn't participate but supplied it. I'm pretty upset at this. My kid wants to keep being friends with the other kids, and I want my kid to have friends, but I'm so disturbed that this happened and that it was hidden from me. What do I do?
And that's tough. What we're seeing in today's society is dealing with people, excuse me, face to face, talking to people. And my wife had put it so, eloquently, that, we're not going to have a confrontation with an individual. We all often in our minds get the idea that, we've got to have a confrontation, instead of we've got to have a conversation. We've got to sit down and say, hey, I need to find out about this, in a non confrontational format. And if we don't feel comfortable doing that face to face and going to that individual, we've got to use an intermediary, somebody that we, could be the SRO, could be others, because we've got to have that conversation. Otherwise, it's going to go on, because that's difficult, because their student wants to have friends, and doesn't necessarily see the issue. He's just worried about, or she's just worried about friends. And that's part of growing up. You've got that friend base, and you don't want to have a problem with that. And, oh, mom or dad, why are you going to talk to him? That's going to ruin my life. They're going to have those conversations, but we've got to have that conversation, because now it used to be with alcohol, and now we're seeing it with the marijuana, that parents are, oh, it's legal, so we're going to provide that. Let alone, we don't know the kids that are there. What problems are they going to have? The liabilities exist for those parents, and maybe they haven't thought about that. So having that mediator that can, make the conversation happen. And if I were brought this, hey, I'm not, necessarily going to look at writing tickets or doing this, but I'm going to say, hey, let's have this conversation because we don't want this to happen again. For the parents that are doing this, or the parents that their child goes there and now they found out that this has happened, and we want it to be good for everyone, and we don't want it to happen again because we want everybody to understand that, hey, there's bad stuff that can come from this, and you just need to understand that it may not have happened in this circumstance, but down the road, could it? Yeah. And so with that conversation, and like I said, my wife put it so eloquently, it's that conversation. It's not confronting them because that just raises the walls when we go in with a confrontational attitude. But if we come in with a conversational attitude and say, hey, let's talk about this. I want you to hear my perspective. I want to hear your perspective. We may still disagree, but at least we've had that conversation.
Right. Can you help with custody issues with my ex?
Um, Not in the sense of, resolving a custody issue. If there is something that is going on, with the custody, can we look at paperwork coming from courts, or, have that conversation with them and say, hey, this is what the court says. You need to go back and talk with them and get this adjusted, because the custody issues are very tough. Each side, their perspective is correct. And so, especially, a lot of the situations, there is a difficult moment where, I'm right, you're wrong. Um, we can help with what the court says, and then help direct them to say, hey, this is what you need to do, because we want to do what's best for the child. And when those custody battles can get very ugly at times, and so we can help mediate and do some things there. We can't go to bat for one side versus the other, but the mediation is something that most SROs are very good at.
Great. Do you deal with truancy issues, or is that a school thing?
Um, when I was there, I would find kids that were off campus that were not attending. And again, my job was, hey, they're off campus. It's not a responsibility in the sense of, hey, I got to bring them back to school, got to do this. But can I mentor? Can I do this and say, hey, this is why it's important for you to be in school? I can have those conversations. And a lot of officers, will do that. The younger students, if we had some truancy issues, we have SROs that will go out and visit the family and visit the home and say, hey, why aren't you going to school? What's going on? Trying to figure out, is this the right place for them, or do they need another type of schooling? What's going on with that situation? We'll take a look at that, but we're not going to go out and, be, hey, you're truant, get to school, do this. An SRO that runs in. And when I ran into kids, it was like, hey, you know where you're supposed to be. I can't make you go there. This is why I think it's important that you be there. And then we might have a conversation later on about, hey, what's going on? Why don't you want to be in class? Or why don't you want to be at this school?
All right, here's another one, another little detail one. My child will go to high school next year. I'm worried about the additional safety issues like drugs and shootings and violence. What can I do to ensure the safety of my child?
Um, what I would suggest to them is getting involved. A lot of what you see, the media out there, these stories, these things going on across the country are right at the forefront. They're out there. Parents see this, and I understand their concern. But get with the school resource officer, talk with them about what plans they have, what things are in place to maintain the safety of their child. I had parents, especially after certain shootings that happened, parents would come and say, "Hey, Officer Collis, what would you do?" You know, and we'd have a lengthy discussion over what plans, what things are in place, why we talk to kids about, you know, their safety. Because one of my most important jobs was the safety of my school community. And so I would suggest to that parent is talk to the school, talk to the SRO, and say, hey, what things do you have in place? What things have happened here that you've had to deal with? And across the country, when I teach and I go across the country, there's a lot of schools that, you know, it's a very safe place to be, even though what you see on the media, you would think otherwise. But school is one of the safest places. And that's where administration, SROs, that was what I worried about most, as my students and my community safe.
All right, here's another one. I know a kid who vapes regularly. I'm not really sure what to do. I've talked to my own child and they're not doing it.
Mhm.
Seems out of my responsibility to tell the other parents, and I don't want to be involved. Is that something you can help with?
It's something that we could at least keep an eye on. And if opportunity presented itself, that, you know, we could talk to the other parent. Again, there's so many different variables there with that, but it doesn't hurt to ask and say, hey, this is what I'm seeing. And is there anything you can do to help with that? You know, the vaping is one thing. I think back to social media when that first really cranked off is parents not knowing what to do, who to go to, if their child was threatened online or whatever the circumstances were. And it takes that, hey, got to ask the question. I gotta find out, is, you know, is this something that you can help with? And what I would suggest is going to, you know, the SRO or somebody and saying, hey, what are your thoughts? And is there anything that you can do or a way we can go about maybe helping this family if that they're not okay with their child vaping?
So here's another one.
Okay.
Seems to me that it's always the same kids getting in trouble. Why can't you get them expelled to keep the others safe?
There is a process that the school, because we don't expel, that is a process for the school. And that is something that they have to go through. There's a bunch of different variables that they have to look at depending on, you know, what type of education that child is receiving. All of those things come into play. And the whole goal is to keep that child where they're getting educated, where they are at least in there. You see some in school suspension programs that they're not suspended, but they're in school because the schools have realized that, hey, if we just expel everybody and throw them out to the street and say you're not allowed in the school, where are the kids going to get in trouble? They're going to get in trouble out there in the community versus, hey, we have them at school. They're in an in school suspension program, for example, and now we can still educate them and, or at least attempt to, while they're in our control there at the school. So you're seeing a lot more of that, that kids are not being expelled because that's putting the you know, the problems that can happen into the community, where the school still has control if they're in an in-school suspension or in an alternative program that keeps them within the confines of the school.
All right, here's another pretty detailed one. There's
Okay.
been an awful lot of school staff and coaches getting in trouble for inappropriate conduct with students in the news. What
Mhm.
can parents do to protect their kids from those adults?
Um, Again, the media, I mean, you're seeing it, and that's an incident that's being flashed across the news, that's going on across the country, and it would seem that that's happening all over the place, and not necessarily the case. But if a parent is concerned, like this parent, of that happening, is opening those lines of communication with your student, getting them to feel comfortable of saying, hey, if this happens or if that happens, you need to feel okay coming to me and talking to me, because they need that trusted adult. Um, whether that be in the school, a parent, an SRO, a coach. And I realize in the question they talk about the coaches and what have you. But again, it's been shown in studies that it's that trusted adult that they can go to, because they get in this quandary. Their brain is still developing. They're not sure. They want to be friends. All of these things. But opening those lines of communication is so important, to say, hey, you're going into high school. You're going to be exposed. Things are going to happen. Drugs, vaping, these type of situations may or may not happen, but opening those lines of communication is so important to get them to come forward. And that way, if it does happen, we're on it and it can be dealt with right away.
And again, I'm going to say parenting is hard.
It is
It is not.
extremely hard.
It is not for the faint of heart. And when we do the suicide prevention trainings, we try to impress on parents there too. It is developmentally appropriate for your child to seek guidance and mentorship from another trusted adult in their life. So,
Uh-huh.
and children usually pick them. And it is normal that my child wouldn't talk to me, but your child will talk to me. So, because
Uh-huh.
they're used to being in the car with me. Sextortion is another one of those big problems
Yeah.
that is going on online digitally.
Hmm.
And always ensuring parents, please don't place judgment, even though you may be very frustrated that your child fell for something. Please
Uh,
don't place judgment, and keeping those open lines of communications is just crucial.
yes.
And for the kids, if you're uncomfortable talking to your own parent about something, please reach out. We're happy to help get you in touch with some people who genuinely
Mhm.
can help you, like SRO Stacy Collis.
Yeah. Very true. Very true.
Well, the next thing we were going to do is make sure that you have a chance to tell us what your SRO wants us to know.
Well, the as I thought about this, and with the position of an SRO, I'll go back to when I first got into the schools, went through, SRO training, was sitting there and like, oh my gosh, I am not sure about this. And I talked to a friend of mine. He was my mentor, and his name was Tony Sanchez. He's now passed away, but he was up in Fort Collins, and Tony was great. And he goes, Stacy, he said, you're going to find out very quickly there's a difference between a police officer in the schools and a school resource officer. And it was so true, because I think a lot of the public thinks that it's a police officer in the schools, that they're doing the same thing that a police officer would do on the streets. And it couldn't be further from the truth, because a school resource officer, we train on a triad approach. Law enforcement is one of those, uh, parts of that pyramid, and what we have to deal with, because things do happen. But even with the law enforcement, um, we don't handle things the same way they do on the street. There are many times that we don't write a ticket. We don't, do something because it's not appropriate for that child. They're not learning what they need to learn, just giving them a ticket, arresting them, doing whatever. We have alternatives. So law enforcement is handled much differently in the SRO position than it is on the street. Another portion of that triad is the public safety educator. We go into classrooms, we go to community groups, we go to other students and talk to them about public safety issues, things that can help keep them safe out there. And it's not even just that, things that we may be interested in, we go in and talk to them, which leads into the third part, which is the mentorship and working with kids and saying, hey, this is something that, we need to help you on. I had many a student that came into me and said, hey, Collis, I'm dealing with this situation. Can you, help me out? Well, let's sit down and talk. And hey, have you thought about this? Have you thought about that? And, it's that triad approach of the SRO that is all encompassing. I loved it in my career, and I did 20 or more years in the schools and working at middle school, elementary, high school levels with all the kids. I loved kids and working with them, and kind of looked at all those pieces of the pyramid and said, hey, how can I make that work? We don't work for the districts, we work for the police department, but we work in conjunction with the district because we're all part of this keeping a school community safe. And it's every piece of that, that we look at. And the SROs there, fitting from this pyramid side, working with teachers, working with custodial staff, working with students, working with community members, kind of all over, because we've got a reach that goes beyond the school to look at some of the resources. And it truly is a resource. Resource with our law enforcement side, resource with our education side, and resources with our mentorship side, because we have access to things that others, don't have. So what I'd like to kind of have people understand is a school resource officer is a different, different animal. The police officer in the schools wouldn't last very long because that's not going to fit that school environment. It's not, people are going to say, no, I don't want that. I want somebody that works with me that, can do that. And so it's so very true. And that's what I want people to understand is that a school resource officer, we're very good at selecting. You said it earlier that some should not work with kids. When I teach the basic class, I'm like, don't forget what it was like to grow up. You've got to understand that because we're not up here and the kids are down here. We're on that same playing field and we've got to work together. My dad taught for 40 years and, we always talked about it and saying, hey, school safety. And he's like, school safety was always a part of my job as a teacher. And, trying to deal with that. So it's everyone working together, and the SRO is an integral part of that process of working together and making the school community a safe place.
Well, thank you so much, Stacy. We appreciate you and your time so very much.
Well, thank you. I appreciate having the opportunity to do this.